was enjoying his breakfast one morning when he heard a loud noise coming from his stomach. He clutched his belly and looked up at his mom, who was also in the kitchen. He had known that there was something wrong for a few days, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He lay there in pain, and his mother asked him, "Rick, what's wrong, honey? Are you okay?" "I think I'm just coming down with a stomach bug," Rick said, not wanting to worry about his mother. She sighed but didn't say anything more, as if she knew what was happening to me. My dad would still be sleeping, so asking him would not be a wise idea. He slept all day and worked all night. Rick was starting to wonder if his dad was some kind of vampire. He never came out of his room when it was daytime, and he never actually saw him eat anything. He just chuckled to himself, knowing this would be a silly idea, but Rick still wasn't sure. What's next then when I'm an unchild? Yeah, it was probably just a notion of pure imagination. Rick thought back to his first day of school, and he had been talking to some friends when the pain had started. Now it was the weekend. He still felt it change to a stabbing pain that just wouldn't go away. Rick started to feel it in his teeth. He quickly went to the bathroom, and his blue eyes were glowing in the dark. He flipped on the switch and everything was back to normal. He got a better look at his teeth. They looked like they were growing into fangs only around the canines, though. This can't be good. He looked into his eyes again. In the dark, they seemed to glow like blue neon signs did when they were left on at night. What is happening to me? Rick said he was quiet, so that he didn't draw any attention to himself. Rick thought for a minute and quickly went to his room from the bathroom. His mom had always said he was different, but he never imagined it would be like this. Rick took off his shirt and noticed that his body was morphing. His muscles were bulging. His stomach didn't hurt anymore, though. He screamed as the bones in his body seemed to be breaking. "Mom, what is happening to me?" Rick said in a tone of agony. His mother was still in the kitchen and quickly rushed into his bedroom. "Just stay there. I'm going to get your father to close your curtains," she said, knowing that any ounce of sunlight would kill her husband. She didn't tell her son Rick this, though he didn't protest. Rick shut the curtains and laid down and began to groan in agony once more. His mother and father walked in and had a look at him. "Rick, you're not normal, you're a hybrid. Your 13th birthday tomorrow will be the final day of your transformation. By then you should be able to change back. You will have to sit there in pain for a few hours," his father stated, as if he knew that the transformation was going to be excruciating. Rick didn't move. The pain wasn't subsiding, but he was starting to feel his bones heal, which was fine by him. The more time passed, the better he felt. It had been a couple of hours now, and the pain went away, and his teeth began to retract. Rick felt his teeth, and they were not fangs anymore. He felt he could push them in and out. He tried this, feeling them push in and out as he felt a weird pressure emitting from his mouth. Well, that's weird and cool at the same time. He knew that whatever this new transformation was, it had been for the better. He walked out of his bedroom, and outside the house, he heard something cracking nearby. When Rick walked over to investigate it, he was shocked to find that it was an ant. He watched and listened as it carried a leaf around, as if proud of what it had brought back to the nest. It was still making that cracking sound as it walked calmly back to the nest. His ears perked up, and he heard a car coming, but it was at least a mile away. He heard it as if it were right next to him. Super hearing and retractable fangs. Rick didn't know what this meant, but he realized that he still had his shirt off. It was chilly this morning. Rick didn't feel anything. He felt as if he were going to roast in the sun. Rick lived off the coast of Maine, but he had never been warm in the cold mornings. It had rained last night, and dew could still be seen on the grass. Yet as he felt the wind kick up, he felt a surge of heat all over his body. It was maybe 45 degrees, and he felt perfectly warm despite it being so cold. It was a particularly cold spring. Rick felt like he could do anything. He ran into the direction of the woods and ran for a little over a quarter of a mile. Anything he could do would have to be done in the forest, since he wouldn't be able to show off his powers to just anybody. Rick stopped in a clearing and sat down on a fallen tree. Rick looked at his fingers and felt his nails grow in length till they were about 6 inches long on each finger. Whoa, that's awesome, Rick thought, and like his teeth, they were retractable. He pushed his nails out and scratched a tree. The nails cut through the bark like butter, yet he felt like he was getting stronger. Rick was afraid of what might happen to him if anyone besides his parents found out that he was a hybrid. Rick grabbed a branch on the tree and ripped it right off. Rick quickly threw it almost 100 yards and it landed straight up in the air, buried deep in the ground. Rick quickly ran back home and decided to get a shirt and a jacket. He didn't want people looking at him with a look thinking something was up. He walked into the house and greeted his mother. "Mom, what did Dad mean by hybrid?" Rick said he wanted to know more. "Well, your father is a vampire. I am a werewolf, so you are a hybrid. But we did not think you would transform so quickly." "Well, my transformation was around the time I turned about 19. That was how I met your father before my transformation. He found me running through the woods. I almost killed him and began to charge at him, but for some reason, he was able to stop me. He chased after me, trying to stop me. When the moon went away, he found me with a deer carcass in front of me. It was half-eaten, and I looked into his eyes. He grabbed me by the hand and escorted me back out of the woods. I went on a date a few days later and then got married after a year or so. Then you came along and we both got jobs. Your father was supposed to kill me, but he left that life behind and began to think seriously about the people he worked for. His mother said not to tell me any more details about my father's past. Rick decided to leave it in the past. Well, Mom, that was some story. But why decide to have a child if you know you're going to be hunted down every full moon? Is this place special, or are you trying to hide me from the authorities? Is that B? Rick said he did not really want to upset his mother. Rick, you have been hiding your father, and I have both changed our names. If anyone finds out that we had you, we will have to change our names again, his mother said, hinting at something else that Rick didn't have the answer to just yet. Rick just thought that Van Helsing was real. He hadn't heard any stories about them since he was little. The Netflix series was his favorite, though. Series? Vampire hunters and werewolf hunters probably existed. Rick wondered if anyone found out what kind of hunter they would send after him. Since he was a hybrid, he would be stronger than both his dad and mother. Rick was caught off guard when he noticed his dad walking out into the kitchen. It was starting to get dark outside and his dad would be coming out to go to work. "Dad, are you going to work today?" His dad was a third shift worker at a retail store, which wasn't the greatest job, but it paid the bills. "No, not tonight or tomorrow, though when you turn 13 you will be going away for a while. Since you are supernatural, you won't be able to fit in at a regular school anymore. Your mother will take you out of school and be sending you to a new school in Transylvania. Since you're the first hybrid, the first vampire werewolf school will be your only way of getting an education," his father said with a hint of sadness in his voice. "You can come home when you're through with the classes, which will take about 6 months. The rest of the year is your free time. You could come back home, or you could advance to the next year and spend another 6 months there." "I suggest the latter," his father said, expecting him to take his advice. "I will take it under advisement. When do I leave?" His father just looked at him and handed him a ticket. "Your flight is already paid for your leaving tomorrow around 4 in the morning, his father said with a sigh. "The layover is in France. From there, it's a non-stop flight to Transylvania. Since it will be your first day there, you will have some time to prepare yourself for the long hike to school. Here is 6,000 euros to spend when you get to school. They will give you a weekly allowance for your lunch and other items needed for school. You can leave the grounds to do other things, but you have to come back before curfew. All students must wear a uniform and be up around 7 a.m. From there, you will get breakfast and head to your classes. At 1 in the afternoon, students will go to lunch. You will be with werewolves during the day, since you are a hybrid. You can choose to go to nighttime classes if you want. The curfew for werewolves is midnight. The curfew for the vampires is 7 a.m. It's up to you to decide which classes you want to attend. I suggest that you go to the vampire classes. They go to classes from 8 a.m. to midnight, and their lunch is whatever they want, mostly blood bags." His dad finished speaking and handed him 2 schedules. "Dad, why are there 2 schedules?" "They give you a choice. Since they don't know what a hybrid will choose, you get 2 schedules. I suggest the second schedule. They get much more freedom since many of the students there are not 13 but 18 and above. It is forbidden for a vampire to turn a child into one. Since you were born not bitten, you will be the only child in their classes. Although exceptions have to be made for special cases, only one vampire will be around your age. Her name is Victoria. She is around 16 and she is the first person in around 300 years to be that young. They made an exception for her, since she was a Van Helsing. You don't have to decide now, plenty of time before you get there. So let's not waste any time going to sleep. Rick was sent to his room and he laid down and went to sleep. He woke up a few hours later and his mom was yelling at him, "Get up, time to go get your things and I'll meet you in the car." Rick quickly grabbed all his stuff, his money, the ticket, and a suitcase that he packed full of clothes. Then he got dressed and loaded up his stuff. "Oh, here, take this," his mom said by handing him a cell phone. "Students get to call anyone they want until class is over. Students have until curfew to make a call. Don't forget to call me and your father," she said, smiling back at Rick. "Wow, thanks, Mom. I'll keep that in mind. I will probably just use it once in a while. I can't even put it to my ear. The sound would be so loud it would probably blow an eardrum," Rick said with a laughing voice. Rick inspected his new phone. It was the latest phone you could buy with international calling enabled. "Who is paying for this phone?" Rick said, wondering how his parents could afford something like that. "The school won't monitor your phone, but they do pay for it. In the first month it's free, but after that, you will have to pay for it. But your allowance from the school will cover it, so you should be fine. Vampires get more allowance than werewolves. The vampires have outside help from their masters. Since you don't have one, you have to come up with other ways to make money. Maybe you could go to the head clan and get a job," his mother said, making it sound like a good idea. Rick didn't know that this would be a terrible idea. The jobs consisted of missions that would turn out to be dangerous to anyone who took them. Rick laid back in the seat and fiddled with his teeth and nails, but as soon as they hit the highway on their way to Portland, a 2.5-hour drive, he quickly stopped doing that and just went to sleep. He woke up about an hour later and fiddled with his phone. He looked at how long it would take to get there. It was 15 hours from Portland, besides the layover, which would be 2 hours. So, after a 17-hour trip for almost a whole day, he looked up where it was, and it showed that it was in Romania. The school, although technically it was in Transylvania, was underground, hidden away from the town. The dorms were both up top and underground from the street view. It looked like any other part of the town, but it was in front of the school. What went on in the school, Rick didn't know. Rick put his phone on the charger his mom had bought him for his phone and plugged it into the car. He fell back asleep, and around 6 a.m. they arrived at the airport. He got out of the car after they found some parking and walked up to the flight counter. "Ticket, please. Have your debit card ready to pay for the luggage. You can have 2 carry-on items." His mom took out her card, paid for the luggage, and escorted him to the TSA checkpoint. "I'm leaving you here." He walked through the checkpoint, doing the usual take off your shoes stand in the inspection thingy. He put his shoes back on and walked over to the concession stand. "1 coffee and a cinnamon roll, please." His mom had left him with about $100 to buy anything he wanted. The man at the stand gave him a black coffee and a cinnamon roll. "That's going to be $7, please," the man said as Rick handed him a $20 bill. He produced the change. He took it and walked away to the novelty shop and bought a pair of headphones. He had spent almost $40 on a cinnamon roll, a pair of headphones, and a neck pillow. He kept the rest and walked down to where his flight would be departing. It still had half an hour before the plane would take off. He sat down and waited for the boarding call, which was about 20 minutes ago. Rick had finished his coffee and waited to be called. "Seating Group B, please." He was in that group and headed up and got his seat. He was in Thiddy 4C, walked toward the middle of the plane, and sat down. He was next to a girl his age who didn't speak a lick of English. She spoke in French. Well, how do you go to America and not learn any words? The same could be said about him. He was going to a country and didn't know the language. He wondered if she knew any words, but she just looked at him with the same expression every time, as if annoyed, every time he tried to speak. That was going nowhere. He gave up. They hadn't even taken off yet, and he decided to learn the French language. He had brought a book with him since he always wanted to learn French. He spoke to her in French, picking it up quicker than he thought, and asked her, "Do you know any language besides French?" She laughed and nodded her head and spoke in English. "I know how to speak English, dude. I was born in Kansas. I study abroad in France. I usually don't talk to people who sit with me. I speak 3 languages and one of them is English," she said with a grin on her face. Surprised that Rick had learned a second language by reading a book once. This girl was pretty and smart. He had never met someone his age who studied in another country. "What is your name, or is that too much to ask for?" Rick asked, not expecting an answer. "My name is Natalie Van Helsing. and I'm going to France to find my sister Victoria. She disappeared around 3 months ago, and no one has seen her." Rick cleared his throat and said, "How old is your sister?" "Around 16. I haven't met your sister, but I'm telling you it's not a lost cause." "Give me a call sometime," and wrote down his number and gave it to Natalie. Rick didn't know it yet, but Natalie would most definitely be calling him. "Natalie Van Helsing just doesn't talk to someone like me. But aren't you going to ask me how I know who your sister is?" She looked and asked, expecting an answer. "Well, spill the beans. How do you know where my sister is? No one has heard or seen her in quite a few months. Your sister is a—" He pushed out his fangs, and she understood what he was trying to say since it was the middle of the day. Natalie was surprised that a supernatural would be in the sunlight. He must have been something different altogether. They both fell asleep and didn't wake up till the host was bringing out snacks. Rick woke up and noticed that Natalie was holding a blade to his throat. What are you doing?" Rick wanted to know what this was about. He had relayed that information to comfort her. "You will take me to see my sister, or you will die before you get where you're going," Natalie said in a hushed tone. Before Rick could protest, she snatched her knife and hid in her boot. "She is in Transylvania, and I'll take you there, but I can't get you into where I'm going. You may have to find your way in." Rick got his snacks and waited for the host to leave and grabbed the knife out of her boot and bent it sideways. Then he proceeded to crumble it up in a ball and throw it into the trash can in the snack cart. "How did you crumple that up like you had a ball of aluminum foil?" Natalie said with a surprised look on her face. "Well, I'm not normal. I'm supernatural," Rick stated as if daring her to make another move. They sat through the entire flight, and hours later they arrived in France. She went through to the ticket counter and had already paid for a one-way ticket to Romania when they landed. Natalie walked back and sat down next to Rick. "I may not be able to go with you, but I have family in Romania. I'll see you around, and you should be more careful with who you talk to next time. Not everyone will react like me. They won't hesitate to kill you next time," Natalie said, as if daring me to talk to someone other than her. "I don't care what you think. I'm going to head my separate way when we leave the airport," Rick said, hinting at anger, but he wasn't really. He just wanted to scare her. Natalie shivered. A chill ran up her spine. She could feel that something wasn't right. "We are being watched. Watch yourself," Natalie said, knowing something was up. They waited for the plane to arrive, and they sat there, and Rick thought she was being paranoid. Just then a girl who resembled her walked up. "Victoria, I thought you were lost." It was 5 in the morning, and Rick just kept his cool. She was dressed in all black with a hood over her head. She was more than prepared to walk in the sunlight as a vampire. "Shh, you shouldn't be here. Don't follow me. I cannot guarantee your safety. Tell my family I'm dead and say no more, because to them, I am as good as dead." She showed her fangs to Natalie and pushed her aside. She quickly left the airport and walked away. Rick had no idea where she was going. Natalie left the airport as well, leaving Rick by himself. He waited for about an hour and boarded the plane. He was finally going to Romania. Most of the people that were on the plane were elderly or didn't speak English. He sat there not saying another word for 2 hours before asking in French which way this hotel is. Before leaving, she highlighted a route on the map I had been given and handed it back to me. I left the airport and ran to the hotel. In about 5 minutes, I had run about 2 miles. I had memorized the route and quickly came up to the hotel. Rick walked in and proceeded to the counter. "Hi, I have a reservation booked for this hotel," Rick exclaimed and looked at the man behind the counter. "Name, please," the man said with a glare. "Oh right, Rick Moon," Rick said, meeting his eyes. "Room 3 here is your room key. Don't lose it or you're not going to be able to get back in." Rick phoned a taxi and paid to go back and pick up his belongings. He returned to the airport and told the taxi man to wait for him at the front. He walked up to the luggage claim, picked up his suitcase, and headed out. He paid for the tip there, and back 25 euros. He pulled out the euros and paid for the fare and a tip of 15 euros for waiting for him at the airport. Rick carried his suitcase up the stairs to room 3. He put in the key and opened up the door. The room was small, with a big bed that must have been a California king. The room was already paid for, and it had a TV. He opened up the fridge, and everything cost money, but the dinner and breakfast were free. Rick headed to the dining hall and grabbed a plate full of breakfast. He sat down and began to eat. He had a plate full of bacon, 3 pancakes, and some sausage. He poured syrup over it and began to dig in. As Rick ate, he couldn't help but feel that he was being watched. Before he could finish his lunch, a man walked up and started speaking. I don't like you. You're not like the others here. You flaunt your wealth around like you own the place. What are you saying? Who are you? I paid one cab fare and ate some breakfast. Look, I don't know who you are, but you better leave me alone right now. I'm warning you to back off, or I'll show you. Rick grabbed the man and slammed him up against a wall with one hand. If you ever mess with me again, you won't be able to walk anymore. You got me. The man nodded his head, and Rick let him go. He ran out of the hotel and down the street. He knew that much since he had watched the whole thing through the window. He walked back to the table where the breakfast was being prepared and grabbed himself a cup of coffee and went back to go finish his breakfast. Rick ate in silence and got up to leave. I saw what you did. That was hardly a fair fight. He looked up and saw who it was. Victoria, when did you get here? I didn't know that you were here. Are you the one that's going to take me to the school? Rick said, expecting that she was the one to take him there. Quit, you idiot. You dare to show off your powers in public? Just wait until the school counselor hears about this. Victoria was fuming, just witnessing a fellow supernatural using his powers in public. Rick didn't want to anger Victoria, but he had enough of everybody's crap and transformed into his beast form, extending his nails and his fangs. His nose crunched and became malformed, looking like that of a bat rather than a wolf nose. He quickly ran out of the hotel, and Victoria, even though she was a vampire, she could not keep up with Rick. Rick mostly took alleyways and the backways of the city. Rick could feel his strength increasing as he ran so fast that people could not see him. Rick ran for about 10 miles and arrived in the forest. He had outran Victoria and was not seen by anyone. He quickly transformed back and walked for a while before he came across a castle, deep in the woods away from the city. Rick had no idea where he was. Just then, a man stepped out and looked him in the eyes. His eyes flashed a blue glow and back to normal. Another vampire, he assumed, since the man was dressed in all black and wore a hood to cover his face from the sun. Who are you? Rick asked, curious to know the answer to who this was. The man just chuckled and said, I am the school counselor. You must be Rick. I am the one who was supposed to escort you to the school, but you're already here. Rick must have run there on instinct. The man walked up to him and said, Come, you will need to learn to use your powers. Ounce you learn from both classes, you will be able to control yourself when provoked. Can't have yourself running around fighting everyone who makes you angry. You may not have realized this, but you tossed a man aside had you not been in control. He would have killed you. That man was a Van Helsing. Their family still comes after the students, and since you're part vampire, you will need to train to defend yourself, not use blind rage to win fights. You may not need blood to survive, but you will need to drink some from time to time to keep up your strength. By the way, my name is Vlad, not the Impaler that's my father. I haven't been around for as long as the first vampire, but I was his firstborn. After my mother was killed by Van Helsing, so we took one of them for ourselves. You may know the two sisters Natalie and Victoria, but you don't know their little secret and why they are so strong. Vampire hunters have a long history of being immune to poisonous diseases, but they can still be turned into supernatural creatures. Most of the family that lives in Romania are a special breed. They are werewolves, not just any kind. The first two have been made. The Van Helsing family has a little secret. Victoria was the first turned hybrid. You may have been the firstborn hybrid, but you are not the only one. There have been many like you. None have survived since you were born and not bitten. You can walk in the sunlight without swaddling yourself in a layer of clothing. I was the one who turned Victoria before her transformation. Seems to have stopped her ability to change and made it dormant somehow. She was hunting one of my students before she could track him down. I caught her in France in the middle of the night. She was kicking and flailing, then before she could get away, I forced her to drink a large amount of my blood, turning her into a vampire. We didn't know until later that she was born a werewolf. Vlad stopped talking. Rick just had one question as he asked, How did you know I was a hybrid? Vlad chose his words carefully this time, and began to speak before being cut off by someone. Think before you speak, Vlad.